and welcome to The Talking Law, a podcast from Women in the Law UK. I'm Sally Penny, a barrister at Kenworthy Chambers in Manchester. I'm also the joint vice chair of the Association of Women Barristers and the founder of Women in the Law UK, an organisation which is passionate about supporting the next leaders in law and encouraging career progression through personal development. Don't forget, you can get a really good idea of who we are and how you can get involved at womeninthelawuk.com. You'll also find a list of all our upcoming events across the country, and we'd love to get you involved. You can also find us on Twitter at Women in the Law UK. This month, you'll meet Ros Bever, a partner in the London and Manchester offices for Irwin Mitchell and also the national head of Irwin Mitchell's divorce and family law team. Welcome, Ros. Hello, Ros.
Hi, Sally.
You are an incredible woman, and I want to start from the beginning. Tell me a bit about your path into law, because you didn't start your career in the profession straight as I did you?
No, I didn't. I started out on construction sites, and I quickly realised that that was not the direction I wanted to go in. After spending a winter clomping around in the rain with a hard hat on and a pair of steel-capped boots, I realised that I wanted to try and look at something else and diversify.
Yeah.
So I managed to secure a placement over the summer in a very, very good friend of mine's legal firm in Wakefield in West Yorkshire. And I quickly realised that that was definitely the career path I wanted to go down. I absolutely loved it from the start.
Wow. Now, was it a daunting transition to make then?
It was incredibly daunting. The very first day I started at the practice, I was sent to court. And having not had any legal training whatsoever, and it was the days before wheelie bags.
Oh, yes.
Carrying 10 files.
Oh, no.
Asking my opponent, how do I address the judge? It was a little bit daunting, I have to say. I also was equipped only with one of those pencils that writes in different colours and was sent out by the judge to draft an order. Fortunately, as is often the case in the northern courts, my opponent was collegiate, to say the least.
Absolutely.
And gave me a tremendous amount of support, let's say, in drafting. It was prior to the introduction of the Family Law Act, and it was under the Domestic Violence and Matrimonial Proceedings Act. It was a consent order for what is now the equivalent of a non-molestation order.
Wow. Well, notwithstanding, given how successful you are as a head of the team nationally, was it a daunting transition to make, do you think? And would you encourage others to do it?
I would definitely encourage others to do it. It is a stimulating career. It is a career where you can, if you want to, be a team player.
Yes.
And you can work in a very collegiate way to achieve objectives that you want to achieve. I also think that the interaction with people is fascinating. Sometimes you come across people that you don't really like, but you get a side of them that you might find a chink of something that you like in. You are working amongst colleagues, usually, who are like-minded.
Yes.
And one of the greatest things, I think, is that most lawyers have a fabulous sense of humour.
Absolutely.
You have to.
Yeah. It's good for our well-being, which I'll come on to a bit later. So just very quickly, before we move on from that, was the fact that you started in a different career an advantage or a disadvantage, you think? And what skills from your previous career did you bring?
I think from a commercial perspective, I was at an advantage in many ways because I'd been accustomed to working in an environment where we were looking to make a profit. And it was a particularly difficult time when I was working in the construction industry. So we were tendering for jobs. I worked for a large construction company, and we were finding ways to tender out at a very sort of at the minimal level, but then finding ways in which we could make money and make a profit or even break even. So from a commercial perspective, it was an advantage. From a legal perspective, as I described in the answer to your first question, it was an absolute baptism of fire. And I think that I was at a disadvantage in that I didn't really know anything about law. However, I do think it gives you a different perspective.
Absolutely.
I still feel today that because I didn't do a law degree, I did what is now the GDL, was then the CPE. There are gaps in my knowledge about certain areas of the law. However, I think that it's very important that you look at legal cases strategically as well.
Yes.
And I think that when you are a lawyer, you do not just have to be technically good or technically an expert. That's a given. You have to have lots of other qualities. And thinking, I hate this phrase, but thinking outside of the box, for example, looking at solutions. And I think sometimes if you go down the track of being a lawyer, you can forget about other things that you need to look at.
Yes.
You are dealing with, well, in my case, you're dealing with people. You're dealing with their life.
Yes.
And you may stray into the territory of other areas of the law and other areas such as tax advice, for example. I am not saying I would ever give tax advice, but what I would do is be able to signpost. Would I be able to do that if I had been just a lawyer from the outset? Of course I would. But I do think if you've done something else before, it gives you a different perspective, perhaps.
Absolutely. And I think that's a good way to broaden entrance into our profession, which often can look so narrow, and particularly from maybe one particular class. Thank you. Can we talk a bit about mentoring and mentorship of women? Did you have any mentors when you entered the law? And who were they? Were there any good, informally or otherwise? And what's just what your view was about that, really?
Well, I described when I went to work in the summer as on a legal placement, and I would say I was mentored by two incredible women who'd set up a firm. It was called Jones Goodall. It was Suzanne Goodall, who's now Suzanne Monroe, and Claire Jones, and they were beacons. They were not fazed by anything at all. They were solution focused. They had a can-do attitude, particularly in the face of adversity. Both of them had personal issues that they had to deal with, and they were survivors. But they also really, really supported you, wanted you to develop, gave you aspirations. I would never have thought that I could qualify as a lawyer, and I never would have done without them. It was also there that I met my closest friend, Sam Hillis.
Oh, we absolutely love
I've
Sam.
got to give her a mention.
Yes.
Because we were both paralegals at the same firm, and we went through some times which were pretty stressful.
Yeah.
Living in what I can only describe as penury and coppering up to put a small amount of petrol into a car.
Oh, my gosh.
And we had great fun, but also we learnt a lot about the law.
Yeah.
We were taught about statute. We were given practical advice as well. At one point, I was living with Suzanne Goodall, who's now Suzanne Monroe.
Oh, my gosh.
And her children. And, you know, it was brilliant.
Yeah.
It was a really great period of my life and gave me a lot of life skills and a lot of confidence in my own abilities.
Yeah, that's so good to hear. Can I ask you this just at this juncture? Sam, who I'm a huge fan of, and she's at the bar. She went onto the bar and didn't, go down your path of being a family solicitor. Did you ever fancy the bar as opposed to remaining a solicitor? I know you're the big cheese now, but I just wondered if you ever fancied the advocacy part and that aspect that I'm at the bar as opposed to the other side.
I don't think I am the best advocate in the world. I find advocacy for directions hearings absolutely fine. I would find cross-examination very stressful and daunting. In addition, I do think that life at the bar, my perception is in any event, is more of an isolated existence.
Yes, it is.
I very much enjoy working as part of a team. And one of the things that I find empowering is working within a team, particularly with a range of age groups. And there is always something that somebody very new to the team brings to the party, an idea that they have that they share with you, and you think, wow, I'd never have thought of that. So I think for me, I like to work as part of a team.
Yes.
I do like to be a leader.
Well, you are a leader. That's why you're here.
I hope I am.
You are a leader. Yeah.
But I also like to listen to other people, and I try to ensure that there is collective responsibility to a large degree. But I think for me, if I were a barrister, I'd just spend my whole life texting, WhatsApping friends. I do that anyway, but ringing them, saying, oh, I'm on my own. I wouldn't want to just talk to the dog or listen to what my mum was saying.
Yes, yeah. Interesting. Now, Ros, I want to talk about the family law sector and really about the last 20 years and your experience and going back to what's been the most significant case in your professional career.
Okay, so over the course of the last 20 years, I'll talk about my case.
Oh, yes, I love your cases.
But over the last 20 years, I think undoubtedly the case of White and White absolutely changed the landscape. And I remember I was very junior at the time. It's really, really difficult to get your head around this complete change in the way in which financial cases were determined. And I think that it was absolutely right for the non-breadwinner, the homemaker. And I pause to say, it is almost always the woman, for there to be a recognition of their contribution, for there to be the notion that there should be sharing. I think it was completely wrong to limit that person's case to need. So White was undoubtedly the biggest change. I think Radmacher, with the recognition of prenuptial
Could you tell
agreements.
us a bit about that? Some of our listeners are not always lawyers.
Okay, sorry. So prior to Radmacher and Granatino, which was a very significant development
Yes, it
in
was.
whether or not there was any recognition of contracts which had been entered into, which would regulate what would happen on divorce. Most lawyers would say it's not embodied in the statute. It might not make a significant difference just because you entered into a prenuptial agreement. Post-Radmacher almost certainly provided that certain tests had been, or certain key points had been considered. So both parties had taken independent legal advice. Both parties had fully disclosed their financial circumstances. It was fair. I've not rehearsed this, Sally, so I'm giving you an overview.
Yes.
Most lawyers would consider that, a prenuptial agreement might be a factor, but after Radmacher, it became a very much more significant factor.
Absolutely.
And it gave the opportunity for those parties who wanted to enter into an agreement before marriage, the opportunity to do so and have some comfort, not complete comfort, that may well regulate what would happen in the event of a divorce.
Which was revolutionary, really, because it was big in the States, elsewhere. And that case really...
I'm not going to say I advocate it in all circumstances, because often it entirely depends upon which party you are acting for.
Yes.
If you are acting for the financially weaker party who's entered into an agreement which you cannot categorically say is under duress, but you suspect it is, I find it a little bit shocking at times. But I still think that people should have the freedom to regulate what should happen in the future, provided it's fair.
Yes, absolutely. That's so great. Thank you for sharing that. Can I ask you then, what are your views about the court? Do you think that we've had James Brown from Hall Brown? I've interviewed him on this podcast. And I just wondered if you thought there was a difference between northern versus southern judges when it came to matters of awarding maintenance. Because in his view, he thought that northern judges were less generous.
I certainly think that there is a different approach between the north and the south. I find that traditionally southern judges are more paternalistic, and that's usually towards the woman or the financially weaker party, certainly in terms of awards of maintenance, be it the amount or quantum of maintenance, or more usually the term of the maintenance order. I also think that there has been a shift towards trying to get some regulation between London and the regions, but it's not quite there yet. At the start of my career, we used to, when we had a high net worth case, usually, when I was practicing exclusively in the northwest, we would, and we were acting for a woman, we would consider issuing proceedings in what was then the principal registry. And we would do that because we'd think, this woman's going to get a higher award, much more generous in London than in Manchester.
Yeah.
What actually happened, there was a change. I can't remember when it was, but it wasn't a massively long time ago, whereby you were inhibited from initiating proceedings in London and you had to go to your local court. We all know that now.
Yes.
And so you'd be sort of saying, oh, no, we would have issued this in the principal registry. I do think there's still a difference.
Do you?
I also think it's very, very interesting. There's a hugely different approach to practicing in the north or the regions and London. And I think that's driven by two things. I think that firstly, and I think it's a good thing, there's a greater emphasis in London, I'd say, on the use of alternative dispute resolution mechanisms, such as arbitration. It's taken off far more successfully, I'd say, in London than it has in the regions, albeit that lots of practitioners in the regions are championing it as an alternative dispute resolution method. And I personally think it's brilliant.
Yes.
Also, the use of private FDRs for those practitioners who are listening. I think it is more common in London. I also think that there is more of an emphasis on the use of counsel in London.
Yes.
I've noticed that there is a big difference. Here, I'd say in the northwest where we are at the moment, lots of practitioners would as solicitors, would do their own advocacy at first appointment, or certainly the preliminary stages, whereas in London, you would use counsel more frequently, I'd say.
Interesting. I want to talk a bit about being a woman, and then I want to move on to well-being and wellness. How's being a woman impacted on your career, do you think? And where do you think we're going with more women in the workplace and the diversity of women in the profession and encouraging men to take perhaps flexible working and agile working? Has being a woman impacted your career?
I think I've been incredibly fortunate. I had the ability to return to work with support from a full-time nanny. Had I not had a full-time nanny, I really do not know how I would have managed. But I have to say that had I not been married to somebody who could afford to pay for the nanny, which cost at the time more than I was earning.
Because you have 3 sons.
I do.
Yeah.
And I remember the stress associated with taking my youngest son to nursery and the nursery calling after I'd been at work for about an hour saying he was poorly.
Yeah.
And could I come and collect him?
Yes.
And crying in my office and thinking, I'm going to be sacked or whatever.
Yes.
How things have changed. We now are in a situation where people do work flexibly.
Yes.
We have fabulous opportunities to be able to work from home. Obviously, we can't have our children with us.
No.
Babies crying in the background. But it means that you don't have to travel into the office.
Absolutely.
Blow your hair, put something decent on to wear.
Yeah.
You can get straight on to doing your work. I also think that there is a shift towards men sharing,
Yes.
which empowers women.
Absolutely.
So, for instance, in my team at the moment, one of our male partners, Nat Grork, will shortly be going on a career break and he'll be spending time with his 2 young daughters, sharing paternity leave,
Yes.
which is fantastic. One would never have envisaged that would happen.
No.
I remember when I had my first son, my husband returning to work after taking 2 weeks holiday, no paternity leave, during which time he had been contacted on a daily basis by clients and his team, his boss. He was back at work, 2 weeks holiday, no paternity leave, nothing. And there was an expectation that it should be the woman. Now, that inhibited the woman's ability, in my view.
Yes.
But that's not just about how society treats women.
No.
It's about how society perceives men becoming involved in childcare as well.
Yes.
And that has held women back.
Yeah.
And that shift is well overdue.
Yes, absolutely. Well, I fully support that because that will then progress women in the professions, not just ours. Thank you. Yeah, that's a very good point. Well made, actually. Now, well-being. If you had more time, what should you be doing, or young women entering the profession or in the profession be doing for well-being? Because burnout rates are high. We work long hours where we have the imposter syndrome, perfectionism, so on and so forth. What would you be doing, and what do you do? I know Laura Cox previously said Prosecco when I asked her about her years at the bar.
Well, Prosecco would be high on my list, but I would say I am a very poor advertisement for well-being. I do not relax very much. When I do, it tends to involve online shopping.
Yep.
Binge eating chocolate, those sorts of things. I think to a degree that relates to my personality. I am an all or nothing person. If I got into doing some exercise, which is certainly something I should be doing, I'd be one of those people who bought all of the Lycra outfits,
Yes.
the best trainers, and did it until I was skinny and muscly. And that's what I need to put on my list when I stop being a lawyer. So if I really could change anything to have a better work-life balance and to think about my own well-being, I might change my personality. I wish I could be more like my colleagues who do their job, between the hours. I love flexible working, so they might work to suit them between 6 a.m. and 3 p.m. and then switch off. What I tend to do is work all of the time. I don't think that's healthy. Do I like it? Yes, I do. When I give up the law, I will give up the law and I will do something completely different. One of the things I'd really like to do is have an allotment and to grow lots of different herbs and lots of different vegetables and get really into it.
Yes, what a great idea.
That sort of thing.
Yes, what a great idea. I mean, there are some research about greenery, outdoor. The NHS have got lots of stats on this and the difference it makes to your mental health, well-being, which is great.
I think I'd only have about 6 months at that because I've already thrown it all away.
Yes, not growing fast enough.
Yeah. There might be some bionic veg by then.
Yeah. Any advice you'd give to a young person starting out in their career in the law from all backgrounds, black, white, minority backgrounds, women, men? Because really the law is I always say it's a marathon, not a sprint.
It is. And I think that when a new lawyer starts out, they have fabulous research skills. They're undoubtedly academically bright, gifted. They know the law.
Yes.
What you also have to do is stand back and get some experience. And you have to be open-minded. And you have to be solution-focused. One of the things I think is really important is don't focus on what's gone wrong because it goes wrong for everyone.
Yes.
We all make mistakes.
Yes.
What you should focus on is how do I get it right? There must be a way. Look for a way. And also owning up and having humility.
Yes.
If you've made a mistake, the best thing to do is to go along to somebody else. I'm always in that situation. No, this has all gone wrong. How can I deal with it? And having that confidence takes time.
Yeah.
So there's that. There's also not making quick judgments. Sometimes we can't like everyone.
Yes.
But try and look for the best in someone rather than looking for the worst.
Yes.
And also, one of the things that I think is really important for new lawyers is when I started out, if I did a piece of work, I would do the piece of work and I would take it usually to Claire Jones, who I mentioned before.
Yes.
She'd get a red pen and she would cross everything out and rewrite the whole thing. And I used to go back to my desk and I'd think, this is the end of the world. Now, if I see a piece of work and I rewrite it or amend it, I do see people feeling crestfallen about that. They shouldn't feel crestfallen. They should learn from it. Don't make the same mistake twice.
Yes.
Some young lawyers send a piece of work to you with typographical errors in.
Yes.
We've all done it. I do it now. I send them to clients sometimes and feel very embarrassed afterwards. But I would check. I think it's really important because it's the impression it gives.
Yes. Yeah, that's great advice. So, who is your favourite fictional lawyer?
I really thought long and hard about this. And I did listen to James Brown's podcast, which I thought was fabulous, James, by the way. And I thought, can I really say who mine is? And then I thought, why not? Ally McBeal.
Yes.
When I was trudging around in my cheap, shiny suits at the start of my career, she was an icon. And no matter how chaotic her life was, she always won. But best of all, she was a great team player.
Yeah.
And she was normal and showed fragility. And actually, I think most of us who practice in the law, we're all fragile.
Yes.
We're all human.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Oh, I know. I love Ally McBeal. Oh, we might have to play the Ally McBeal music.
Oh, we should do.
I can't remember. It was the Vonda Shepherd who was playing a lot of that. Now, can I ask you about a book that you've read that has inspired you or stayed with you throughout your legal career?
So I haven't got one that stayed with me throughout my legal career because
Well, you're still in the career, but yeah.
But when I was going through a particularly challenging period of my career, which was about 2.5 years ago, I read Alistair Campbell's book, Winners. Now, I'd always not really been that keen on Alistair Campbell, but it really inspired me because
Really?
he gave examples from Stalin to Alex Ferguson to the Queen of how you can achieve success and what success looks like to you. And he also gave me the inspiration to think about how I wanted to adjust from a role of being not just a fee earner, but a fee earner, a solicitor, where the priority was my client.
Yes.
And obviously my duty to the court.
Yes.
But also to change that so that I was looking at how I could perhaps look at my team as my client and how I could adjust my mindset and try and achieve the goals that I had identified myself I wanted to achieve. And I read the book and I didn't like Alistair Campbell. I'll be absolutely honest about that. But I read it and I thought he gave a can-do attitude and I really liked it. So that inspired me.
Yeah, fantastic.
I also don't like the fact that when people achieve success, they sometimes forget about where they come from.
Absolutely. I totally agree with you.
And so to me, one of the best quotes, and I do try and think about it, is from Theodore Roosevelt, who said, "Keep your eyes on the stars and keep your feet on the ground."
I love that.
And remembering that everybody makes a contribution.
Yeah.
And every contribution that is made is equally valuable.
Thank you so much, Ros, a partner in the London and Manchester offices of Irwin Mitchell and also the national head of the firm's divorce and family law team. This episode of Talking Law has been brought to you by Irwin Mitchell. Thank you very much to Irwin Mitchell. I'm Sally Penny. Thank you again for listening to Talking Law. Do let us know what you think and perhaps who you would like to hear on future episodes by leaving us a comment wherever you listen to your podcast. And if you subscribe, you won't miss an episode. And don't forget to check in and see what we're up to at womeninthelawyuk.co.uk. Talking Law is a What Goes On media production for Women in the Law UK. And see you all at the Irwin Mitchell celebrating 100 years event on the 4th of December in Manchester.